Before we start, here's a timestamp if you just want to skip to the build section of the video, except before then I'm really going to go over some of the pitfalls of this setup and kind of who I am. I'm just a guy that makes YouTube videos. I have my main YouTube channel, and this is my second channel where I do a lot of setup and background stuff for that particular channel. I also do just some regular hobby stuff to do with computers and home labbing. And one of the big projects I'm also kind of working on in the background is moving myself away from all of those the data mining and data scraping, all that sort of stuff. Now, when it comes to AI and LLMs, particularly for this use case, I'm not going to use it for actually writing code. I usually use it for learning, so then I can search for better resources, because SEO sucks at the moment. I feel it's almost deliberate, so then you have to use those AI responses. I also know that all of these GPTs are unethical, basically. There's probably no LLM that doesn't have a route of using some people's stuff without their proper consent. However, I'm a bit of a nihilist in that regard, and I really do think that this Pandora box is open. It's already done, which is kind of shitty to think of it that way, but also that's not going to stop the greedy, unethical people from using it, so why should they be the only ones to benefit from this? And one final last thing is I like to reuse a lot of old hardware, as per this computer is all used stuff, except for I think the case and the power supply, but they're still very old, and I'm running it on solar, and I'll only be running it during the daytime hours. But then again, a whole third of my solar supply is probably going to go into this, and the reason why I want to use my solar so much is because the government here in South Australia really sucks. We get almost nothing from putting power back into the grid now, and they limit it to a total of 5 kilowatts per day put back into the grid. So it's just going to be wasted anyway. In late November, I saw these SXM2 cards for the V100 for very, very cheap. So I went ahead and lowballed them even lower, thinking, I don't really think that these are the right cards for me, but they kind of tick the boxes, and they accepted $118 each, which is pretty good price. You can sometimes find them cheaper, but they have been going up in price because they're 16 gigabytes still. People want this. Now, this isn't actually all my money. Most of this is actually coming from a friend who kind of wanted to get into this sort of stuff, and he tasked me with setting it all up and doing a lot of purchasing and a lot of researching, and I was like, hell yeah, I want to learn something new and have some fun doing some computer stuff, and if it's not on my dime, sure. And as a result, I kind of bought 4 of them, though I also do have to host it, which will be a whole different thing entirely. Now, there is a lot of discourse around these SXM2 cards, but I'm going to be honest, a lot of the people that are commenting on, oh, that doesn't work, they're no good, you don't want them, are people that don't actually have experience with them. They're just regurgitating opinions from other people or guesses from other people as fact. I have actually got them working in an LLM. However, it's not all perfect. There are limitations. These normally have NVLink. The PCIe cards don't, but these, with the adapter cards, won't actually have NVLink. However, I'm not too concerned about that myself. That is faster and better, but to get NVLink boards are very expensive. And you have to make sure that it does things like come with little washers, which I see that this only has one of the washers that should be on there. That's the thing I'm going to have to watch out for. So with this being the only thing that you get, you're going to have to purchase a hell of a lot more things. There's the adapter boards. There's potentially risers that you're going to need for your PCIe slots. Then you're going to need your heat sinks. These ones are very cheap, by the way, and almost not damaged. As you're also going to see, this particular cooler, not great because it blows directly downwards into the bottom of the case, so it's not really flowing through a lot. Then you're going to need thermal pads for your VRMs, though you can come up with other cooling solutions. I just find that it's probably easier and better to do it this way. Then you're going to need fans. And speaking of fans, probably 3D print some sort of shroud, which I've got here. So that's a minimum of 137 Australian dollars extra on top of the card itself. So we're not quite to the PCIe price, but you know, we're kind of getting close. you're going to want to do a lot of bargain hunting, and you better be comfortable with haggling, because a lot of these people are from Asia, where they do a lot of haggling-based stuff, and if you buy it without haggling, you're a sucker. But haggling does feel really shit. Then, once you've mounted all of this stuff together, it won't really be a one-slot card anymore. It's almost 2-slot cards. Take that into consideration when picking things like your motherboard. Or go for a solution with risers, which I'm still unsold on. Now, there are all-in-one kits that you'll find on eBay occasionally, but they are very expensive, and personally I don't really trust their airflow dynamics and their VRM calling, just in general, but that's something that you'll have to decide. They're all a little bit different. Now, a little bit more on these adapter cards. They are not perfect. I had a conflict with the heat shielding sitting placement, making it impossible for it to fit inside the computer case. So I had to bend the PCIe back face plane thing. They also may prevent certain features from happening or require a lot of tinkering to get them to work. But I don't have any experience of getting to that point yet, so I'll have to get back to you on that eventually. And another thing to know about these particular cards is there's no HDMI out, so you can't really use them for gaming. Others can have these options though. Now, since purchasing all of this stuff, I've not actually had a chance to fully set up this full rig in its full trim. And I'm not really going to be able to. I do have to buy some more things. Yeah, during this, I learnt that PCIe slots are a big hassle. These things, probably don't buy more than 3 of them. If you're going for a V100 kit sort of setup where you're doing all of this extra work, you're probably budget oriented. Getting a motherboard that has at least 4, even 8x PCIe slots, it's going to cost you hundreds of dollars. And that's on top of all of the other ancillary things you're going to need. Maybe you need a different processor because you need more lanes to be able to do that amount of stuff. And then maybe even have to buy RAM if you're getting a different version, which at the moment is a real nightmare. And if you, say, for instance, wanted all of those 4 PCIe lanes to be 16x, well then your motherboard used is probably going to cost $400 to $500 minimum. But I personally don't mind 8x. I don't care so much about the extra speed. For me, it's more about the accuracy of the model that we're going to be using. I'm very dyslexic, so normally these things work way faster than what I can read anyway. But then again, I haven't tested more than one card at a time. I suppose we're going to find out today. This was only an 8GB model that this happened on. Even though it was meant to be 16 gigabytes, I think there's some kind of limit because it needs the full 16 gigabytes, but there's 200 megabytes approximately used in these at all times. Maybe that's a problem to do with my OS choice. I did a whole stream on doing it for the first time, and almost finished. But it did actually work, I just had to boot it up the next day to validate. For any of you that were there and wondering, the thing that actually changed it is the above 4G coding or decoding thing. That's what was required. After that, all worked fine. For now, I'm going to summarize the process by setting up a second card in the rig. Let's move this out of the way. Obviously, the first thing you're going to want to do is to clean everything up. So I've got myself some isopropyl, a tissue, and the head of a toothbrush that broke off, which I'm going to be using for helping with the cleaning. This cooling block, not such a big issue to clean off. Now, when it comes to the card, well, weirdly, they've really shoved in a lot of the thermal paste around here. So I don't know the full ramifications of leaving that stuff in. You probably should remove and do, I don't know. I feel that the last people that had this probably know better than I do. I'd like to see what other people know about this sort of stuff from first-hand experience. I'm just gonna clean off as much as I can though. You don't really have to worry too much about peripheral thermal paste or any sort of thermal interface. Really, the big thing you have to do is make sure that the surface is nice and clean. That way, it'll mate flatly. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the choice of adapter board. If I had my time again, I would probably find out the measurement from the mounting bracket to this mounting point here. This one is for the NVLink, but that doesn't work on PCIe. So if you do see some with these sorts of things here, or this is just completely blank altogether, that makes zero difference. All you need is this one here. Now, having that extra space is because I didn't check any sort of reference on whether this cooler would fit, because I just didn't assume that would be a problem. But we're not in Kansas anymore, so I probably wouldn't have found the information anyway. There are ones that do remote setup where you can have multiple cards do a thing, but those prices end up becoming a lot more expensive. You're also going to want 2 power headers. It is a full 16X card that we have here. Though, you know what? I haven't actually verified that all 16X lanes are wired up. I mean, it might be. I can't actually see the traces. I think they've covered the traces up. Oh, that's great. Ooh, I love that. Now, you may also notice that on the backside here, a lot of these are not populated on the pins here. I do believe that that's because half of this was for the NVLink to go from here to communicate through to here and then off to the other side. I do think that that is all you need, but I can't actually say that for certain. Let's now talk about putting this on. The last one I had more of these washers. This one only has 1. I am tempted to take the washer spring out. Investigations on a very poorly documented card. Nope, this one has 3. This one, I could see, has all 4. Now, you also don't have to worry about putting these upside down, as these guiding pins are offset. So it only goes on one direction. Here's the mounting brackets, by the way. We won't be using these because they get in the way. I'm going to try running this one without the spring entirely. And then when I take this spring out, I can put it in with the other one to make the one with 3 complete. Jamming a screwdriver into these things. Well, that's confidence inspiring. Oh, there we go. Now this is some sort of MEG connector. I don't know fully what the name of it is. I think I know what the springs are meant to do. There is, I don't know if you could see that very well, a bit of a gap between the board and the card. Now, it's going to be more of an issue on this side because this side doesn't have the connector on it, and that's where the flex came from, because it was pulling this PCB towards it around that connector. I honestly don't think it was anything particularly bad. It probably is going to be fine. I don't mind being the guinea pig experiment. That's kind of the opinion that the other guy had as well. Now, when it comes down to tightening these up, there's a lot of opinion based upon the actual torque specs of these, and the torque screwdrivers are very expensive. I also then looked at some other people showing that they did it was fine. They talked about it being found that finger tight was about half the strength needed for this. Now, they didn't go into what finger tight is, and by looking at bone surgeons, which is the occupation of people that were looking to see what finger tight torque specs are, there's not really any information on what they mean by 2 finger tight. What is the radius of the screw, or whatever it is that they're doing, that is going to be done finger tight? Because that matters greatly. So I just grab the shaft of the screwdriver and just do it as tight as I can. The first time I did this, I didn't properly check into what 2 finger tight was or even think much about it. So I really do think that I massively over-torqued it. So I backed it off, and I mean, it works. So that doesn't seem to be an issue. Your mileage, though, will probably greatly vary. I should probably grab a spanner for this. Damn it, I just over-torqued it again. 2-finger grabbing the screwdriver shaft and torquing down. Trying to do it fairly evenly. Then you do the outer ones. I did a little bit of thermal paste testing previously, and I found that it doesn't really want to spread over such a massive die, so I went with my preferred choice of an X, then it'll get all the way out to the corners, and a dollop in the middle. It's got keys on here, but they're omnidirectional. I measured out the thermal pad thickness requirements. I have that in the stream. Instead of doing layers upon layers of thermal pads like I did last time, I got myself some really thick stuff. I believe it was meant to be 5mm, and this stuff that I got is also meant to be 5mm. Let's measure it and cut it. There is a bit of a theory about what sort of thermal pads you should use. It comes down to how much heat you want to take out of there. Because remember, the heat that you take out of your VRMs and put into your heatsink is going to then also affect your heatsink's ability to cool your actual processing unit. Okay, finally, putting this on. Now, you want to be careful. You don't want anything to really stick until you've lined up your screw holes. They look fairly lined up. All right. Immediately everything moves. With these screws, one thing that you have to be aware of is that what you're trying to do is push and compress the spring whilst also screwing. And then it will reach its maximum depth fairly easily, but you have to push pretty hard to get it screwed on. There we go. These ones you don't, at least for this heatsink, you don't have to be too concerned because it will limit the depth that you can have. There you can see that it has bottomed out on the screw, and that means it's tight enough. And it's not even particularly that tight once you get past the spring tension amount. How's the board flex with no springs in it? Suppose you decide. Here's the beast that runs it. This is an x89 system. It did originally have, I think, 16 or 32 gigabytes of RAM. I can't remember. I put in some other RAM, and I just kept on finding old DDR4 stacks. I'm a bit of a tech hoarder, I suppose. I think it's now got 128 gigabytes of like very mismatched RAM. More what's important here is the fact that the RAM itself just is plentiful to be able to help the models run. Where the bottlenecks are, we're gonna have to find out. This was my cooling solution, by the way. It was just a PC header fan with some like gaffer tape trying to direct the flow in. Not great. But you know what? It did the trick for some minor usage. When doing more usage, however, it ended up getting a little bit warm. Not hot, but warm, very warm. I also wasn't able to max out the wattage of the GPU units. I think the maximum I ever saw was a little over 200 watts, but these are meant to be 300 watt cards, and maybe that's a PCIe card limitation. I would probably have to do some research on that. Now, we have a bunch of slots in here. Let me show you. We have a full-size 16X slot, full-size 16X slot, full-size 16X, full-size 16X. This XL99 motherboard is very peculiar. When you try to use some, it then disables others, and then it also depends on how many cores you have. This slot here does not get used at all if you have 40 PCIe lanes in your CPU. Only if you have 28. But then you get less, I don't know. It's very, very confusing. No bifurcation. Bifurcation is very expensive and hard to come by. And then I ran into a logistics issue of trying to fit in a second one. I couldn't fit in the card here. I could almost fit this one. This one's going to get full 8X or 16X. I can't remember if we're running two of these. Then this one is going to run at 8X. So why not put that one there? But I found back then I couldn't fit this card in here because the PSU is in the way. I think I'm going to try to fit the PSU over there somewhere. Old school non-modular power supplies, huh? We're gonna need to switch out this power supply. I could run one externally and then jump the starter on it, but I don't wanna have to do any sort of like timing on that. And here's an old used power supply. It came with this lovely cable that was really incredibly long for GPUs. I believe I bought this before double-headed 8-pin connectors were very common, so I kind of just spliced one together. I'm not going to be using that cable. Probably perfect for something like a 4090 or a 5090, but you know. Editor Phil notes here, I went down a rabbit hole to see whether I could fit cables from other PSUs. Short answer, no. I had one real one, and then, you know, the spicy one. But I did actually check it, and it was fine. Let's bring back the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And would you look at that? We have two powers for it. Oh god. Thank god my GPU has no power. Wait a second. Do I reckon it can fit in there? I don't want to go butchering this case because I don't think this is going to be my final rig for this. That is a very close fit. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's how we're having the PSU go in. Feed these through. And with a slight bit of finagling. Hey, now it looks like it fits. Hey, look at this. All of that effort I went through for the last reverse computer, and I've just done it all in one go. I think it looks pretty freaking awesome. Let's hook up the first, then this guy will pop into a slot down here. Now, will this fit? Let's connect some power. Good. Now, hopefully we haven't disrupted our airflow too much. Air should come in at the front through the front panel there, then get sucked down into there, and then back out through here. As for here, it's going to suck in through here, and through here, get through there. Now we just need this. And I don't think I designed this very well. Too wide. I noticed that this card was wobbling a little bit. It was just not quite held in strong enough. So I clearanced this with an angle grinder. Quality craftsmanship on my behalf. I'm thinking, the next time I do this, I'm probably actually just going to cut these chocks off because they're not used at all in this particular setup. Don't need to cut too far off, just like back to here. We'll lose a little bit of thermal mass, but I don't think it really matters. Now you go in. Okay, finally. Got it set up. I had to do a little bit of massaging on one of the edges here, but now fits on there pretty well. I also got the measurements a little bit wrong, so the heat shrouding goes all the way from the top of here to the bottom of the PCB. I mean, this is not the right sort of fan anyway. It really needs to be a static pressure type fan to get through something so dense like this. And it's hitting this here just a little bit. I suppose I could get a riser on this and just kind of move this one out of the way. I could take a Dremel to it, but it is 40-something degrees today. Very hot. And the shed gets very even hotter. I don't wanna. Oh look, the fan lines up perfectly with the old PSU vent here. So I'm not expecting the world. Just, you know, it to get us through some testing. Okay, well, I mean, it's jank, but it is hooked up and it is running. Got a lot of cables around here at the moment. Error 19? Not sure what that is. Time to read the diagnostic manual. So I'm back to square, well, I suppose 2 actually. We've got the Vulkan card in here showing up and working in GPT for all. We've got ourselves the DeepSeek R1 setup. It's only filling out about 8.5 gigabytes. The normal GPU is just using its own little bit. Hi there. What can you tell me about GD script vs Lua? It's making those thinking sounds. We can actually read out what it's doing, but I'm so dyslexic this is way too fast for me. How's hardware running now? Running pretty hard. About 170 watts. Is it done thinking? I can't actually tell. Yeah, it looks like it's done thinking. And we got ourselves an answer. Not the fastest thing, but, you know, for somebody who's dyslexic, fast enough. Now, let's go ahead and try to connect up the other one. Now, every time this tries to boot up, I think it's a motherboard issue because it was doing it even before I put in these cards again. It wants to boot loop at least once and then tell me that there's something wrong with the motherboard. We'll see if it happens now that we got 2 in. It does take a really long time to do anything. I don't think I've ever seen it stick on either 6 or BF. That's a weird one. Oh, it just boot looped. Okay, well maybe it will fix itself. And it's going straight into Linux. Perfect. Now we have 2 cards in. The fan seems to be keeping it quite cool, so we're good there. Just when it starts to run, it gets really fucking hot. And look, both of them are in. Also, I don't know the difference between Vulkan and CUDA. I haven't really tested it out that much. You know, I'm gonna try CUDA. And let's just hit regen on that. Oh, wow, we went from about 20 to 50-ish. All right, CUDA it is then. I really should have checked the answers, shouldn't have I? Oh well, that was pretty fast. Okay, let's close this off, because seemingly I don't think I can run more than 1 card. I did get LM Studios. This one should have a lot more customization. Ooh, that's a lot of VRAM. We should probably turn off the AMD. I get the feeling that that would just interfere with things. This one was updated 8 days ago. Let's try that. Got 9 gigabytes on here. Almost 9 gigabytes. Okay, well, it's not 100% evenly split, but you know, that's not so bad. Also, the power usage doesn't really go up, which is a good thing. All right, I can know Lua, but am trying to learn GD script. Wow, that's a lot of tokens. Oh my God. Does it tell me how many tokens a second it's working at? My God, that's fast. This is so much better than running it on my 3080 that I've got on my main computer. My God. That's so good. And it's got like formatting and everything. GPT-4 sucks compared to this. Oh my god. I'm impressed. Well, that's impressive. And I'm glad that I've got it working now. I suppose the next thing to do is to wipe the drive and then put on a non-GUI version. That way I can just use a terminal to SSH in or whatever it is that I need to get Llama to work remotely and put this computer in another room, because that buzzing sound that it makes, that's going to be too much for me. But wait, hold on. If I run a non-GUI version, just really, really light, should be able to get rid of that Radeon GPU and then run another card. Now it will be 3 X8 cards as opposed to 2 X16 cards. I don't know if the speed's going to be that big of a problem for somebody dyslexic like myself, but that's pretty interesting. Maybe that's for another video. And maybe I'll do some comparisons between how accurate it is. For now though, it's working. Good. So, I hope I've shown how to make the V100 card work, because a lot of people say that SXM just isn't worth it, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. I don't have onboard fan control, which is probably something I should have considered. I got the wrong type of heatsink, which this one is really problematic with its downwards draft. I can change that up by having risers and then angling them a little bit more so then they don't butt straight into the motherboard and don't really have a flow out method. I probably should get more static pressure rated fans, but for now, it's working and it's usable. And since I can only use 3 cards in here, I'm probably going to grab one of those cards and maybe stick it in my main PC, since it really doesn't use a huge amount of power at idle. And no, I'm not going to get the sort of adapter board that has HDMI out. I really don't need it to game. I'll just have it for running LLM stuff. Because at the moment, the setup that I have running, trying to run it on a 10 gigabyte 3080, it's not a good card, really, for this. The 3060 is apparently the one to get, because it has, I think, 12 or 16 gigabytes or something like that. Much better for running LLM stuff. Maybe a little bit slower, I don't know, but it's apparently the one to have out of regular consumer cards. The price to performance, that is. For now though, hopefully you'll check out other things we got here, maybe go check out my main channel, but for now, I'll catch you all next time. Goodbye. What do you think? Good?